Hey everybody, welcome to the Creative Coffee Break Live. My name is Vander Puchert, and if you haven't met me before or have seen me around on your streams, I'm the card guy. And unfortunately for me, that is a label that is stuck a little bit, and I thought, hey, why not own the fact that I am the card guy? And this card journey has taken me in a very interesting space where I started to meet very interesting people. Now, probably also a little bit about this whole card idea. When I initially started doing content on LinkedIn and on YouTube, and it's still true, as I was really thinking about how can you unlock creativity in people and make it interesting for people when they connect, when they go into ideation, explore different kind of topics. So using game techniques and all kinds of supportive tools is really something that drew me in. But for some curious reason, and I guess it's also because it's very accessible, a lot of the tools that I explore in my kind of journey through this brings me to card decks. And if you look at my channel and the content I've created, like a lot of them kind of touch on card decks, and there's different kinds of card decks. And on this journey, I crossed paths with a very interesting guy, Nick Kellet. And Nick himself is, and I didn't know this about him. I had to find out going through content that he's created with other people, and also online, that he's an entrepreneur. I know that about him because he's the founder of Deckible, and we're going to talk about Deckible a lot. But then also he, before he created Deckible, he also had or has a award-winning game under his belt called GiftTRAP, and I'm going to definitely ask him a little bit about that. But today's conversation is really going to be about Deckible. Now, what is Deckible? And if you think about that, and we're going to deep dive that a little bit, is that it's basically the Audible of card decks, but even better. And Nick is going to tell us all about that. Also, this is a live stream. Even if you're watching this afterwards, I would encourage you to jump into the comments, ask questions. If we don't answer it live, if you're not here now, we will also answer the questions for you later. So without further ado, I want to introduce Nick Kellet. Nick, welcome to the stream. Welcome to the Creative Coffee Break. It's really great to have you here.
Yeah, great. Thanks for arranging this. It's exciting.
Yeah, and
definitely.
You probably saw me do a really terrible job introducing you there. Like, would you just take a minute just to reintroduce yourself and maybe cover a couple of the topics? Also, like the GiftTRAP, if I pronounce that properly, element or production that you did. Like, can you also touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, if someone asks me what I do, I actually say that I invent things for a living, because I pretty much do. And I've been that way ever since I was a kid. Like, I walk into things and see things that don't work, and I come up with a solution. So I've always had a passion for board games. As a kid, I started playing Monopoly, got bored, and created all these extra extensions and more interesting things to do with games by adapting Monopoly and then creating my own games. And I was also into computers really early. I programmed Connect 4 on my Commodore 64, which goes back a long way.
I'm a ZX Spectrum guy personally, but yeah. There
you go. It's like a religion, right? It's the earliest form of Android versus iOS. Right?
Totally.
And I made this game of Connect 4, and I was also creating board games, and I went and tried to sell my board games to Milton Bradley, who was they're part of Parker or Hasbro. I forget who it is these days. They got acquired, but
yeah.
I tried to sell them a computer version of Connect 4 back in 1978 or something like that. And they said, this is funny, but they said they think there's no market for computer games. This is like the world's biggest game company said that, right? So when you innovate for a living, you realize that incumbents don't see anything coming, and that's the experience that Blockbuster had, right? It's so true. It happens again and again and again.
Yeah.
That the person who's already in a space does not see the truck coming that's going to, crush them, right? And so I've had that experience all my life. I got some amazing feedback from Milton Bradley, and I actually got them to play test some of my actual board games. That was fun. But the Connect 4 game never went anywhere. But and then I I created various software products along the way. I did a tech exit, which I sold my software startup to Business Objects, which is now the biggest business intelligence company in the world, and they then sold them themselves to SAP. Um, but just as I was leaving, because I'd kind of had my fill of working inside a big company after my exit, I'd made a board game because I was like, well, I had a passion as a teenager to do this. Now I have the funds, the time, and the means to go and make a board game for real. So I did, and I created GiftTRAP, and this is my proudest moment. Let me show you
There
that.
it is. There it is.
This is
The
my,
award.
this is the Spiel des Jahres prize. This is the German game of the award. This is like an Oscar of board gaming, right? The Germans are the most serious gamers in the world. If you've never been to Essen in Germany, it's an experience. They're really like, the whole country is committed to gaming. And picking that up and standing alongside some of my kind of gaming greats was an amazing experience. It was so, yeah, that was probably one of the most fulfilling moments of my career, I think.
It's definitely like a moment, like, yeah, for sure. And the thing is, like, now you have this award, and like, where did the journey then lead you? Like, because I kind of feel like the two areas are overlapping at some point, the gaming.
They all, honestly, this feels like it's there's a thread that weaves through it, right? And so I crowdsourced my board game, the artwork for my game. The game is about gift giving, and there were 640 gifts in the game, and we crowdsourced the gifts from the photos for the artwork for the game, which seems so ridiculously easy today, right? With Mid-Journey or anything will make images, but then it wasn't.
Yeah.
And we chose to crowdsource it because then we didn't even know the word crowdsourcing, right? The word didn't exist.
Yeah, but I mean, I wanted to comment on that. Like, of course, you talking of that time, like crowdsourcing itself was pretty much like, are you giving like stuff away, like, and getting people to help you with stuff?
Right. And we discovered Creative Commons licensing, right? So that was early, but it existed. I got the idea. I mean, you don't need to have bright ideas. Just you can steal them and borrow them from somebody else. So Jones Soda is a very popular, successful soda company in the US, and they basically, all the labels for all of their drinks came from their customers, right?
Yeah.
And so that was like a prototype of crowdsourcing, or as we would call it today, UGC, user generated content, right? So I understood that, and after I sort of focused on my board game for a while, I was beginning to think about technology again, because maybe I'd overdone it with my exit to Business Objects. I was worn out by software, and I was like, oh, let's go to the physical world and do board games. And I did that for a while, and then I was like, oh, I've got the kind of software itch again, and I started looking at that, and I started thinking about lists. Because my software was Venn diagrams. The software I sold to Business Objects was Venn diagrams, and a Venn diagram in a database is just a series of a list of keys. This list of IDs and this list of IDs. If you intersect them, you get an AND. Or that's a very technical, nerdy thing, but we made it totally visual, so you could ask questions visually. That's what the product did, right? It was very cool. And so I understood lists, but I thought about creating a list platform. And I discovered Listly existed.
Yeah.
And so I reached out to the founder of Listly, Shyam, and we had like a month's dating period, right? Where we decided we would, join forces rather than me creating a competitive product. We decided to join forces, and I spent a good few years working on Listly as co-founder, and we took Listly to 1 million users. So it was a fascinating experience. We had a website and an app, and it was so much that I learned from that has flowed into the Deckible, quite honestly.
And so you've basically for real like lived the startup life, right? Like, because I mean, if you talk about like the kind of archetype of like stress, working hard, putting a lot of time in, like it's sometimes the wallet catches fire. The mortgage. So that whole experience is under your belt.
Yeah, I don't think I've had a day job since I was 24. I don't know, something like that. I enjoy it. It's frustrating because it's challenging, But the number of times I've gone through this scenario where I describe something to somebody, they look at me blankly, don't quite get it, and then 2 years later they go, "Oh, that thing you were talking about, I really get it now," right? And from a board game to Listly to I did this in-store TV kind of in-store promotion with Raspberry Pis and TVs.
Damn. Okay.
Yeah, doing local advertising for a bit. That was a product that I built from scratch. And then I kind of flowed that into. I got into the kind of personal growth thing, and sort of journaling, meditation, reflection, and I began to realize just how many decks existed. That was how I got into card.
Is that how you're kind of connected into the card deck space? Like, is through the
somewhat. I mean, I had one of the game here is a deck. Let's see.
Yeah. Oh,
the art of game design. So
sorry, like this is going to happen a lot for people watching. Like I have that one too.
Right. There you go.
Here's the book. Brilliant book, by the way. Like you want to explore it.
Yeah,
we're going to talk more about that.
And Jesse is fascinating guy. Anyway, so that was kind of part of it. And you just, as soon as you start looking, you realize just how many card decks there are.
Yeah.
And to my estimate, there's 100,000 unique card decks in the world. And that is a gross underestimate, in my opinion. I'm only counting English only, just because I haven't searched other languages. But I think even 100,000 is a low number. And how many books are there? There's literally, even if you just focus on ignoring novels, the number of business, personal growth, strategy, coaching books, it's a huge number, millions and millions, right? And we just see a trend that people are heading for shorter content because attention spans have gone, we're overloaded, right? So our attentions have shrunk, and the card deck is super appealing because it's a snack, right? And like if I pick Jesse's book is like 6 inches thick, and this card deck has got like 91 cards in it, right?
Yeah.
And the every one of these is a unique lens. Like I'm not going to remember all of these. Like that is not my purpose in life, to remember shit, right? That's what we have computers for.
Yeah.
We remember less and less these days, right? So I draw out the thing and I remind myself of that. This is incredibly valuable because then I have the expert. I've got Jesse Shell sitting on my shoulder, a global expert in board game design, helping me because I've got his knowledge packaged up in a deck, right?
Yeah.
I can go deeper on this. I can take this card and go to the internet and dig deep into that, right?
Yeah, it's like,
but that's how we learn.
And I think if I can kind of like just latch onto something that you said earlier, and I mean, we're not evangelizing for people watching this like cards. It's just interesting how they connect because this exists. It's not like trying to establish a kind of argument for their existence, but.
No.
The interesting thing that you just highlighted with books, because you made me think the other day, is that I have a very dear friend of mine, and we discussed this a lot because I like the old. And we're going to discuss physical card decks and digital card decks in a second, but I like to have a good book in my hand. But the kind of challenge I face, and I've spoken to a couple of colleagues and friends about it, is that whole question of recall. Even if you do the Audible thing, you listen to the audiobook, it's like, what is the recall? But then I think you said it when we initially started talking about doing the stream, which was compelling, is that it's not necessarily about recall, it's about application. Right? So, I mean, who cares what...
The worst thing that human beings do, if you and I walked into a bar for lunch, we would probably order what the other one orders, because that's a very kind of typical behavior, right?
Yeah.
And if you didn't, you'll probably order what you ordered last time, right? And in business, we do exactly the same, but that's the worst thing you can do. You should look at the full menu of options when you choose something. But all those menu of options are not top of mind, right?
Yeah.
And so when you actually rely on other experts like Jesse Shell, right? other decks, other content. Every creator assembles their best knowledge into a deck. They make that snackable, revisitable, memorable. You can go deeper into it, but it's packaging up the best practice in a deck, right? And this is mind-blowing statistic, but 80% of people do not finish a book that they start, right?
Yeah.
If you're an author, that's a good reason to stop writing. And if you think that is bad, do you know the statistic for online courses?
I don't have the number, but I've heard that it's insane, like low.
It's
but also
94% of people do not complete an online course.
Yeah.
Right. So we're selling this, snake oil that doesn't work. Right.
Yeah.
Not
and
me, but the industry, the educational industry of teaching people content, teaching people best practices. We package it up into a book, we package it up into a course, and nobody's finishing them.
Yeah, because no one's using it.
That's broke.
Yeah.
That is broken, right? And that's what I believe card decks solve.
And the thing is, though, I mean, like even for me exploring it, I just wanted to show you, like there's a card deck that I'm currently looking at. For example, I got this from our mutual friend Steven. Like he recommended it's UX for tabletop games. So it's kind of a set of. So it taps into like the standard heuristics that I've seen before from UX, but it kind of just aligns it with I mean, I'm not going to be able to focus it in. I'm also like,
I'm going to buy that. That's right up my alley.
And it's I mean, for me though, like I'm still working on a video for this, but it's like I like the idea that all the heuristics are here and I can access them, but then also I'm not necessarily a board game designer, but the examples that they're using are related to board game design. So I get to learn about these heuristics in a different perspective, which then hooks a little bit stronger into my mind, in my opinion.
I love, there's an expression I love. It's called standing on the shoulders of giants. And, the other way to express it in a more modern term is curation. You don't need to invent anything today. You can just curate it.
Yeah.
And that deck is the curated best knowledge of game design. And that, you combine that deck with this deck, you've like just hired for $50 for this deck and $50 for that deck. You've hired the full knowledge of the card deck industry, right?
Yeah, totally.
That's, that is interesting to me to think about it that way, right? So we just think of card decks as they're just short, snacky, revisitable. They're a memory jogger. They're an amazing randomizer, right? Because you can actually have a stack of one options and a stack of another options and combine one from each, right? So that's an amazing randomizer. You could pick a color and an animal and come up with a pink or a fruit, like a pink banana, a yellow apple. You can combine options from lists. And human beings, I innovate for a living, but my brain gets still using these techniques is a very effective way of generating new options, right?
Yeah. And I think it's like, I mean, I've been reflecting on it, and I kind of also triggered in one of our previous conversation, but it's kind of like a combination of things colliding. But I think at some point I was watching you guys in another channel talk about different card decks, and the idea of tarot came up. And I found it very, very compelling, and I started looking into that a little bit. And don't worry, we're not going to light any candles or incense now. Maybe later for a different stream. But the thing is, what I liked, and I think there's a leap, because the thing is, you look at the cards and you do an interpretation. It's kind of like it's a link to, for lack of a better word, to your creativity, right? It's like and the thing is, the cards trigger that thinking. And I think a lot of the cards that I review, for example, the intention is not to give you the answers, it helps you seek them out. Because in a lot of times in where we work, and even I kind of equate it to where I'm at now, is like I used to be in a very creative space in my previous life. And
Right.
then I moved to a more structured space. So what
Right.
do we have now to, I can't just go and have 7 beers over lunch, like, and then come up with ideas. You need other ways. And I found card decks to really work with that. I don't know if you feel the same way, but
100%. Like the whole idea of realizing, like, I go back to my meal example. You pick from a smaller and smaller menu option. You order the same beer, you order the same food, right? And you're also influenced by people around you. You're in a meeting, people ask you to vote. The social pressure, if you vote knowing other people's data, is you lock into less and less options. No one says, hey, I think of something completely different. That takes a lot of courage.
Yeah.
To stand up in front of the group and say, no, that's the way we should go.
Yeah, you don't want to go there.
No,
yeah,
no,
but I mean, I see
just
what you
watch
did.
me
We're
go
going to
to the
screen
news,
grab
I'm
that, and
laughing.
it's going to end up somewhere like if you've been following anything that was going on in the news now. But yeah,
I just saw that. I saw myself on the screen. I'm like, oh dear.
yeah,
So it's hard to be different. Even I live and breathe being different, but even I fall into the trap of conformity. So people who don't consider themselves creative are more and more trapped in that existence, right? And card decks are a wonderful lubricant. Like, lots of people use card decks to icebreakers. One can hate the term, but people use it as a kind of gaming mechanic, right? And I said that there, like, games are, why do we love card decks, right? Just as before we drill into the technicalities of it, they're game-like.
yep.
Right. So if you walk into an HR meeting that's like, yeah, we're going to do some team building. Everyone's like arms crossed, no, we're not. You're going to ask me how I feel, and I'm not doing that, right? So they're game-like, so they get past your resistance, right? You think you're playing. And like I speak from this authority from someone who's created a board game that gets people to talk, and there's not a rule in the game that says you have to speak. But nobody plays the game in silence because the game leverages so much psychology. It's never played in silence. That's the magic of the game, right?
Yeah.
But understanding that is the wonderful thing when you bring a game to the table, you bring everyone with a different mindset. They're not thinking work. The other thing that's, really important about card decks is they're messy. You throw them around, they're tactile, they're not ordered. Everything in life, look at our internet. It's 4 little boxes all in a row, lined up. Flick, flick, scroll, scroll, right? Chaos is pleasurable. Chaos gives you greater ideas, and you can combine stuff and mess them up, right? And non-sequential. Like, people write books in a linear fashion, but that's so flawed in 2025, right?
Yeah.
People jump to the chapters they're interested in. They bought the book for a chapter, not the whole book. No one wants to read 130,000 words to get something.
I also think, Nick, like, for example, like one word that isn't there that I think is important to add is accessible. Because I don't know if you've, like, from my past, I've explored a couple, in companies where you kind of look at some of these advanced there is kind of corporate or enterprise board games, but usually the licensing, the costing, like if you're just a facilitator who wants to do something more interesting, the price goes up. But the thing is, because I was reflecting on some of the conversations we had and also going to the stream, like why card decks? And I think the fact that they are so accessible. So just to give people and also get your reaction. So for example, one of our mutual kind of geeks on cards, I mean, he'll probably hate if I say that, but have the artifact cards, right? Which is just basically empty cards, right? You create your own cards. Which I found very compelling. And then also just to latch on to your comment about the kind of randomness, the combination. Like, for example, there's a card deck that I'm also looking at from him where it gives you an idea of what you can do with these ideas. Like, choose how to make the first mark, like there's all these kind of interesting
things. That's on Deckible too, by the way.
Just saying, we're going to get into that soon.
Yeah. Well, one of the other things, we had an amazing conversation at Cardstock a few months ago, and it was exactly this kind of conversation: why cards? And one of the biggest things that I hadn't picked up on was that basically cards depersonalize the response. If I say to you, I think that's crap,
Yeah.
you know, in the night, I wouldn't, you know, if I use a nicer language, but whatever I say, if I'm delivering bad news to you, I don't think that's a good idea. It's personal, right? But if I draw a card from Jesse Shell's deck and say, well, this is the best practice that I think it doesn't actually hold by.
Yeah.
I didn't say that. The card deck said it. So you can blame the deck, right?
Yeah.
That is significant when you're dealing with facilitation and group sessions because it depersonalizes it. I think that was one of my biggest, like, I think I've studied this area more than most people, but that was one of my, that was a blind spot. Maybe I just taken it for granted. I hadn't seen it, but it was fascinating to have that put into words, right?
Yeah. And it's totally,
so,
yeah, it also aligns very nicely with, sorry to interrupt you, the kind of the thing that drew me to Lego Serious Play, for example, is that the conversation is really about the model, not you. Like it's kind of like a
right,
rule. Like you can kind of tear the model apart, like, you know, and ask questions, but never
right.
the person who's built it, right? Which, you know, like, and you have the similar kind of aspect around some of the card decks. One thing I wanted to ask you though, in the way you see it, because I mean, I recently, like, I always look. Someone joked with me once. It's actually a mutual friend of ours, and I didn't mention that you're from Canada, right? But also a Canadian. Two lovely ladies, and they kind of looked at card decks. For example, you have, she calls it, like, there's cards with words on them, then there's there's just cards that you play games with.
Right.
They take different forms, right? Because some of them have rules, some of them are just reference, you know, like
they're all those. I know who you're talking about. Those guys they're on Deckible too, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Sneakerfish and
Sneakerfish, right? Exactly, right. So it's so important. Like okay. So another gaming, a theft of an idea from the gaming space, as I play a lot of games, right? And we use an expression in gaming, a gateway game.
Yeah.
Right. A gateway game. If you're big into gaming, you'll have heard of, you know, Settlers of Catan, Ticket to Ride, Carcassonne. You know, these are classic gateway games. They're games that you bring to the table to people who know nothing about games. You teach it to your friends. They don't have to read the rules. And they're like, oh, wow, this is cool. I want to play more games, right? If you'd taken them a much heavier game, it wouldn't have been a gateway game, right? Because people would have gone, oh, God, that was too much, right? I'm done. I'm not interested in games, right? But when you love games, you want to bring more people to the space, right? And like, you know, you're a great example of something that must have brought hundreds of people to card decks, right? You are a card deck evangelist, right? And you know, I raise that question to the industry as a whole and say, what is a gateway deck, right?
It's a very interesting conversation.
Many of the decks are too complicated. No, I'm not criticizing the deck, but like when you actually come to the table to bring somebody who has not done this before, bring a gateway deck, not a heavier deck, right? There's nothing wrong with the heavier deck. If the person understands the topic, that might just work. But there are, like, for me, there's 3 gateway decks that are really kind of interesting and simple. One is a values deck. And all it is a list of 60 cards, maybe, with 60 different values in them. What do you value? Well, if you and I had a values conversation, I can tell, I've done my values thing. I spent a lot. So I can tell you my values are adventure, integrity, creativity, and relationships. That's kind of my 4. And, you know, but everyone's different. It's much more nuanced than Myers-Briggs to put everyone into 16 boxes, right? So that's a gate. And the exercise you do with that deck is you spread the cards out on the table and you do what's called a card sort. The technical term in the industry is a card sort, right? You know this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And you lay them out into the yes, no, maybe. And the human tendency is we always put too many in the yes box, right? And, you know, from 60, if you tell me you've got 10 values, it's bullshit. That's
totally,
that's like, that's saying you stand for anything, you'll fall for anything too, right? So you need to boil it down to 3 or 4. And it's a lot harder than it seems. But that's when you do that exercise. And that was one of the biggest things that sold me on card decks. When I understood the value of a card sort, it's incredibly hard to do. Like, it's not like, Einstein hard, but it's personally challenging for you to come up with a set of values, 3 or 4, that are real. You can come up with an inflated sense of your own ego version of what are your values. But let's just play a game for a minute where if I did that exercise with you out of a deck of cards and we came up with 3, and then I went and stood in front of your team and said, okay, and I laid out 10 cards, which of these, and 3 of them were yours, because everyone on the team, how well do you know Werner, and can you pick his top 3?
Yeah.
If you'd pick the right 3, which your actions and words line up behind it, that you live by those values, everyone on the team would get it right.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a little bit like
if
that
you have an
personality
enterprise,
poker, right? It's like
yeah,
how do you see yourself
right,
and how do other people see you, right? And that learning that you get from like seeing the two kind of sides of that.
Right. And, so a values deck is something everyone should have. Second deck that everyone should have is the strengths deck. So what are your strengths? And, honestly, the best thing to do is figure out what they are and then get other people to do everything else you're bad at. Do not try and get better at the bad stuff. Just delegate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get AI to do it. Anything, but don't do it yourself. That's just going to suck your soul dry, right? And the third deck is an emotions deck. Because if you have like a standard male vocabulary, hey, Werner, how you feeling? I bet the answer's fine, right?
Yeah.
I'm being funny, right? But
it's okay.
Fine is not an emotion. Fine is a blocking tactic.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about it, right? If you can develop a much larger vocabulary of the emotions, how are you feeling? Excited, nervous, stressed, angry, frustrated, blocked, whatever it is. And then also you can say, how I feel that in my body is I can feel it here or on my chest or wherever it is. We all feel things differently, right? But being able to name what you're feeling, if you can name the feeling because of how it's located, and you can say, okay, now I realize why I'm feeling that, I can do something about it, right?
Yeah.
And if at the end of every day, because you know your values, you can say to yourself, did I live today in accordance with my values? Yes or no. If it's a hell yeah, you're going to sleep like a baby. But if you are, I shouldn't have done these 3 things today because they really like jammed with what I value. And I've got to go and do the same old crap tomorrow because I haven't had the courage to say, no, I don't want to do this. You are heading on a downward slope towards, some kind of, you're accumulating minus mental wellness points, and where you end up is up to you, right? But if you live true, so if you're fully equipped with understanding this machine that we live in is signals and data everywhere, right? So if you understand what are the incoming signals, you can align the signals to your values, do your strengths, delegate your weaknesses. Like this is like, honestly, this sounds stupid, but this is stuff they should have taught us at school.
Yeah,
I didn't get this. I didn't know
before.
this.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. And so this is why I'm so passionate about card decks. These are the simplest, basicest card decks. They're just choice lists.
Yeah.
A values deck has got 60 words, 1 on each card. The strengths deck the same, and an emotions deck the same. There's only so many emotions.
And I think also like what I realized is that, for example, I have one of my favorites is Purpose Anatomy, right? And it's one that I reviewed a while back. It's from the Netherlands. But the thing is, I used it at some point when I started my own little business, and it really helped me kind of shape like what is my purpose. And then like as I evolved and I went on this kind of Swiss adventure, and at some point like I had to kind of revisit that because I started having questions around like, okay, you know, like it's tough times here. What do we need to do here? And then one of my colleagues said to me, but Vander, have you like maybe you need to grab that deck again and look at it. So it was also kind of interesting to see like what did it look like back then, and then what do I actually kind of align with now. And I think the decks that you've described, or kind of this process, is the same, right? This is how it evolves over time, and what becomes more important for you. Are you?
No, totally. And the thing to realize, like, you know, there is a deck for everything, right? It really is. Like, I look back at Apple's ad campaigns for the iPhone, and they literally took full page ads to teachers what apps were, and they literally had, you know, a full description of a weather app, and a full description of a map app, and a full description of a calendar app. And so it taught us all these things. And Apple's been telling us there's an app for that, there's an app for that, there's an app for that. So we know that now, right? Literally, there's a deck for that. Because if there's knowledge, that knowledge can be distilled, simplified, and packaged up as a deck, as a short form, snackable thing, right? And you know, whether you're into business, coaching, tarot, oracle, creativity, play, there's a deck for that. And that's compelling, right? And you know, there's lots of people who've recognized this, right? Like, you know, here's the very successful book, right? That's available as a deck, right? With basically the ideas of the book distilled. So you read this book and think, oh, it's going to change my life. Probably not going to, because you're going to read the next book and forget all about this. Yeah. But if you buy the deck, open it up and choose a card, you know, and follow that, you're going to actually put these into action in your life, right? And this is all about habit forming, right? I mean, that's to me the biggest idea with Deckible is about daily practice. And daily practice applies to the workplace just as much as personal. Your daily practice with your team is like, you know, what are we feeling today? If you teach everyone, if you build a culture where people are more open to communication, and card decks are wonderful for that, there's a role for card decks in every day in the workplace, and there's a role for personal growth and reflection, right? So it's just fascinating stuff.
Yeah, and that's why I jumped across to the next topic here, is that, you know, like, I think sometimes, and I wouldn't say like the word guilty is maybe a tough word to use, right? But sometimes when you think about this medium, I think about activities, sessions, workshops, right? However, I did say to someone, and I admitted to that, because in my, like, there's a little cupboard just around the corner here, hidden from my wife so that she doesn't see how much money I spend on these things, is that there's a whole load of these card decks that I have that I've never actually used in a actual situation. Because what I mostly do, and this kind of links, and I want to hear your reflection on it, is like it links to the before. Because what I actually do is I look at the content, I look at the thinking behind it, I look at the structure. Sometimes I learn more from the card deck to try and get into the head of the creator and what they're trying to do, and then apply and twist it into the context that I require. And the cards might not ever appear in the session or the work I'm doing. But I just wanted to like kind of set the flow into just before, during, and after that you have here.
The purpose of before, during, and after as a topic is really to say, you know, because there's two sets of people who use card decks a lot today. And in my mind, they're just ahead of the curve, right? It's not that they're odd, but they're just ahead of the curve. One is facilitators and coaches, right? And the other group is the Tarot Oracle crowd. And both sets of people own 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 decks, right? I don't know. I'm guessing you're in the 50, you're in the 20 to 50 range.
It's a problem.
Right. It's a good problem. Like you're saying, I'm addicted to knowledge. That's all, right? It's not.
Yeah.
I'm addicted to finding information in a way that's easy for me to consume and recall, right? That's a positive thing. There are lots of bad addictions, right? This isn't one of them. But you know, the way we think of it with Deckible is, you know, and I talk to facilitators about this. Think about before the day, because facilitators are often paid by the day. So they think about the billable hour or the session, right? And that's what they're thinking about, the performance that they're putting on. It's a performance when they're coordinating, and they've got an agenda to run to, and they're running time and managing people and all that stuff, right? Their head is full of that stuff, but it's great. But what my kind of thought process on that is, look, if you can make the content, if there's a deck that's relevant to the topic you're working through, if you can make that available to everyone before the session, right? Then there are a set of people who don't want to be overloaded or confronted with this model that you're going to present to them in the session. Present it before the session so people can do pre-homework. You're not shocking anyone. And then very much so, there's another set of people who do post-thinking, not pre-thinking. And they want to revisit that stuff after the meeting and say, hey, when we talked the other day in the session, I thought about this, and I've gone back and read the stuff again, and now I want to talk about this. I didn't raise it at the time because I didn't feel blah, 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 all that stuff, right? So if you recognize before, during, and after think about the life cycle of content, it's about building habits and being able to revisit anything at any point. Hey, the day when I said this, but what I really now feel is this, right? We're allowed to change. We're allowed to reflect. And that's the healthy thing about, you blend personal growth and the workplace. There's nothing you say is ever cast in stone. You're allowed to go back and say, I feel differently today about this. I feel we made a bad decision last week, whatever it was, because we all went down this path. I've thought about it. How about we revisit that?
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
So, that's...
and sorry, like I'm interrupting again. One of the areas that also is interesting for me is that I reviewed this card deck a while ago, as well as a physical version of it. I can't remember how many, but it's a set of archetypes. It's like these general archetypes, like the magician and the traveler, explorer, adventurer. And I used it once in a session, and then a dear friend of mine, client, she contacted me a couple of weeks ago and said, listen, can I borrow the card deck? I want to, and she she's a more than able facilitator herself, but like just grabbed the card deck, went off, used it. And they kind of like try to attribute certain archetypes and attributes of these archetypes to some of the strategies and work they were doing. And I was thinking that, okay, cool. Of course I wanted my card deck back because, that's the way I am. But then it's interesting, like even in after, like to share or at least have a token or reminder that, hey, these are the 3 archetypes that this group looked at, or,
Imagine if your music today was like that. You had to give it the album and you couldn't play it. Like, how spoiled are we? We now want to be able to play anything on our phone. We want every book we've ever read to be on our phone. But you're treating your card decks like a library.
Yeah.
Fred's got this book. Mary's got, where is it? I want it all. And so, we live and breathe with this device. It's everywhere we go, right? So why are my card decks not on here, right? That's the, if you buy into the idea that card decks are useful for all the reasons we talked about, right? And I'm not like, obviously I'm the founder of Deckible. This is a thing that we believe in passionately, right? But everything we've talked about up to this point is just common sense about how we learn, grow, and change in 2025, right?
Yeah.
But we have this set of expectations today that, why can't we get it digitally? One, it's green. Do we need, like, how many trees have I knocked down from my card deck collection behind me, right? We don't need to print it. But more importantly, it's not about printing it or even the trees. It's the fact it's weightless and spaceless, right? You could have if every deck you owned was on Deckible, you have a device that doesn't get any bigger. This is like a TARDIS, right?
Yeah.
You can actually fit an infinite amount of stuff inside it. It doesn't get bigger. It doesn't get heavier. And Apple launched the iPod with 1,000 songs in your pocket. It was a very cool metaphor. And it's like, well, you can have all the decks you need in your pocket on the go wherever you are. Because when is it in your day you have a spare moment? Well, it's when you're on a bus, on a plane, in a reception, where you can doom scroll and dive into social media. But was that good practical use of your day? Yeah. Probably not. So those can become learning moments, right?
And I guess this also, this kind of brings us to the whole question, and this is one of the big questions, and I think we touched on the reasoning behind it. Is that, I mean, and also like Nick, I'm really burning to jump into and show Deckible a little bit, because we've messed around in it the last couple of weeks. The thing is that, I mean, I'll be remiss not to ask you this question, right? Is that, and I think we've debated a little bit, is that there's this idea of the physical, which I adore, but then also you have the digital, right? And I think you've touched on that. Is like, cool, like you can have a couple in your pocket. So for example, I have the physical card deck of Dave Gray, like with all the different frameworks on it. But to be honest with you,
you've got it it's on the wall behind you as a poster.
Yeah, here it is, right? And this is my son's artwork too, right? But it's here, I see it. But lots of times when I reference it, because I'm thinking of certain problems and issues, I actually jump into Deckible to just flick through the digital version. It's just easy because I'm too lazy as to walk 5 meters that way. But
you're also lucky enough you work from home for like, I don't know, 4 days a week or something. So you know.
Get me into trouble here. 2 days, my boss might be watching.
But if someone works, wherever you are, the content is not where you are, right?
Yeah.
So even if you're in a building and you're wondering, wow, it's not here, right? You've got it on your phone to show someone else. It's a learning communication tool that you can rely upon, right? And the funniest thing I don't think people think about just the power of platforms, but I was a serial Spotify disliker. I really didn't want to go to Spotify because I bought these albums. I bought them again as CDs. I had my multiple, several boxes of albums that I collected, and then I bought them again as CDs, and then I kind of digitized them, and then I'm like, Apple starts trying to sell me iTunes and buy the song, very clever, right? And then Spotify comes along and says, have it all, right? And in the end, what I pay for on Spotify is my mental construct. I don't pay for the music on Spotify. I pay for the data that Spotify adds on top of the music. So I can pick a song, pick a band, and say, create me a radio station for this song. That's based on a lot of intelligence and a lot of data. I don't need to know all the other bands that are like this because it does it for me. So it keeps me current, interesting. It finds me new bands to like, all because I said, I love this band, I love this song, make me a radio station. That is valuable. Playlists are valuable. So every platform, like, why is Amazon valuable? Because it tells you everyone who bought this also bought that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
We don't think of that because it's like breathing. It's just part of our existence these days. But that's what a platform does, right? And so digital does more. What does that mean? Well, if I open up, pick out this physical deck here, right? It's got a problem. It's got a two-sided problem. Even Elon Musk can't make paper three-sided, right?
Yeah.
And so you put the stuff on the front, the stuff on the back, and you've got some other stuff you want to say. Where does it go? Well, in card books, they send it to a guidebook. That's kind of like if it didn't make it on the card, it's in the guidebook. No one looks at the guidebook. No one uses it. With Deckible, we don't. Because we're digital, we have it. Yeah, exactly, right? We can have 3 sides or 4 sides, right? So the digital experience is richer. We're not trying to compete. It's just saying that's what you can do, right? And in addition to that, we can also have audio and video.
Yeah.
So I can listen to you telling me about the card or a story about how this game mechanic is used. Give me the story. That's the best way to make me emotionally connected. I don't know if you heard of this. 7% comes from words, 28% comes from audio, and the balance comes from seeing the full experience, right? We get so much more from when we see the person. So why does the card deck just have words and images on it, right? Digitally, it doesn't have to.
But Nick, this is me rubbing my fingers together, and I'm probably I'm getting ahead of myself here because we still have a couple of topics that we wanted to cover. But shall we just jump into Deckible, right? You've kind of alluded to it. I think you set down like a strong argument, and I want to kind of show people and we can talk a little bit through this, because I think there's also a lot of practical questions, right? But the thing is also like, and now we're going to kind of give the game away, right? Because we were geeking out about it before, like only my mom, you and me are probably going to be like really stoked about it, but we were actually really in Deckible all the time, right? So I'm just going to, I'm going to go there and like, ta-da. I should have like a little applause button, right?
Right. Yeah, we talked about this the other day, and it was like, you know what? I know I'm gonna talk through, so I just turned it into a flashcard, 6 flashcards to remind me through that, right? So, you know, and you can flip them over, right? You just tap the cards to flip them over, and that was the essence of the talk. And you know, honestly, like I love the expression as a Brit. The expression is to eat your own dog food.
Yeah.
And we used to have a guy worked at a supermarket who was a dog food buyer he bought the dog food, right? And he used to go on TV and eat dog food. It was a wonderful metaphor. So we're using this, right? We're using, I gave the father of the bride speech at my daughter's wedding using a card deck that I made on Deckible just for the purpose, right? Everyone else at the wedding, their speech papers were floating in the wind. Mine was just on the phone. I just flip. You know, we live in an age of digital media. So why isn't this stuff digital? It should be, right?
Yeah.
And then, you know, you're showing that. What's wonderful is you can't do that with a physical deck, right? You've just expressed a prioritization. You've said that's more important, right? You can put those cards in order of priority.
Yeah. And flip them over.
You can lay them out. You can flip them out. You can tap each one individually to flip it over, right? Oops. You can pinch and zoom to make them bigger and smaller.
And then also and like you mentioned, there's the guide element, and then also if there's video, for example,
right?
Tap on the video.
And there's no video on these because we haven't created one, but but it's there, right?
I mean, let's also be honest, Nick. Like, much respect, you rustled this up quite fast, right? So,
right. And but let's take a dive into your deck, right?
Yeah, let's do that.
You and I talked ages ago, and you're like, "Oh, I should make a deck," and I was like, "Okay, yeah, you should." And you've gone and done it, and it's freaking amazing. It's brilliant.
Yeah,
right?
And let's be honest. I didn't say that. You told me as a challenge, like why aren't you creating your own one? I remember that clearly because when we first met. So I'll talk. I mean, but the thing is this is still in beta version, and I tap my hat to you for
your deck is in. But that's the whole. Okay, that is like let's just whoa. That's a big statement, right? Because we're in the digital realm, we can release this right now. 100 people can have it. They can give you feedback, right? Gutenberg has a lot to answer for. He makes everyone perfectionists, and they don't and won't and never release their product because they're tweaking it. You've got your. I mean, you took a fair amount of cajoling and nurturing to get your deck onto Deckible, right? But now you've got it. I think you would. Your next deck, I think you'd load it. Your next deck, you would load it straight away in really raw form, right? Yeah. Because in the last week, I mean, I helped you a bit with to get it going, but then you've taken over that and you've managed everything. You've changed all the artwork. You've done everything, right?
Yeah, and I kind of
that's what a digital experience should be.
Yeah, and I'll kind of and I want you to kind of break in where because I just want to talk through it. So. Just for folks who haven't seen this, right? So Deckible is available on Android and on iOS, right? So you can go grab it.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, it also works on iPad, right? Yeah.
And an iPad too, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And
just saying it runs on an iPad.
The landing page is kind of like a layout of all the decks that you have in your this is what I have in my pocket, right? So I have a couple here.
Right.
Of course, there's a marketplace that I can go explore and I can go and find more. So I've been digging into, and there's a couple of really interesting decks here already. How many is there on Deckible at the moment? Like
900.
And like from tarot to spirituality vibes. I have a couple of friends.
Business decks.
Someone who's in the chat, Matun, he definitely needs to get into the spirituality thing. He needs that. But also what's kind of curious is like...
You've out of how many times have you reviewed it? Probably 10 of the decks you've reviewed are on Deckible.
Yeah. So for example, my previous live stream was with Jens Malstead, and his card deck is here. And what's really cool is that even like, I mean, I try to link it off in some of my reviews, but sometimes I forget because I'm just the old fart. But we do link it in the videos. But sometimes I would, before I even own the deck, like I think I did it with Jens's deck. I downloaded it on Deckible and I kind of flicked through it, explored it, and I went, okay, cool. I want to have a physical version that I, want to have in my hands, which is great. Also, just from what I appreciate, because the other day I found this one is, for example, when you have certain activities, there's like a event, like a calendar that you go back to. So, for example, I was messing around with my own card deck. So if I click on that, for example, it brings up the stuff that I've done, right? So there's all my cards, which is quite interesting. But let's jump into it.
You had one of Dave Gray's cards there, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, his card deck is over here. Right. So, for example, if I want to, I always jump into
just randomly pick a card.
Yeah. So you can do that. For example, do a quick draw. Right. So you have the cards there and flip them over. So there's all the models, for example. You can zoom in.
Yeah.
Right. And explore them even more. I mean, you can make notes on them, right? For example. I mean, I haven't even explored all of this stuff, right? And this is all controllable, right? So I just want to go to, because the other thing is also there's a whole, I mean, for people who are, by the way, if you wanted to create a card deck, and do people just sign up and reach out to you? Because I think there's a more, like, not everybody's like a silly South African who like hassles you. Like how's the,
the general... people literally turn up, discover Deckible, sign up, watch the video, load a deck, and go, right? I mean, it really is.
And there's even I discovered there's like a card deck explaining how to do it.
Right, there is. Yeah, totally. Yeah, and that deck, by the way, the deck that explains how to do it comes with all the data to load that deck. So you can, rather than create your own deck, you can just say, oh, I'll grab all the data. You follow the process and you've loaded that deck yourself, and you go, oh, I get it. Now I can go and do this, right? Because I tell people think too much. And this is all Gutenberg's fault, right? We're all perfectionists. We don't want to start anything until we know the way to the end. And Deckible is complete opposite to that. It's like, look, just start. It's going to guide you through it. Like, you've seen the checklist. The checklist is an amazing feature that steps you through everything that's missing and takes you to the place you need to go to fix it. And the list shrinks and grows as you go until you're ready to publish, right?
So just to give people watching this context, so when you're in the back end of Deckible, I've gone through this experience now where all the cards get uploaded, there's certain processes, but what was really useful is that there's a whole list of different checks that you go through. So, like, I mean, for example, didn't have proper descriptions. There were some cards that was missing that I had to upload. But then I just want to also, like, then you can of course see the updates in real time. So my cards at the moment it'll be available soon. Like, I want to launch it really soon, but at the moment it's in test mode. And then of course, once I'm ready, I submit it and you have a team that approves them, right? So there's a little bit of quality control going through. Yep. But ultimately I can now view this. So for example, there's like all this content here, I can control it. And I updated it, and there's these nice little graphics, and some of this is like generated by the system. And then also you have the concept of a guidebook, right? So in this case, I've just used separate cards, but one of the examples that you used earlier is that a card can have multiple sides in Deckible. So I can have one card with several kind of steps that kind of goes into the whole card deck or space. So there's the instructions of how to use it. So this is my CX enabler deck. So my card deck that I've created as part of a customer experience toolkit, and there's two decks in it. So one is the CX enabler and one is the CX challenge cards, and these are the challenge cards, and you can explore them. I always like the blank canvas, and then you can go drag them in. So for the use case, I guess I would see it being used like this. And then at some point you can also like flip them over. But the other thing that I still have to do here, which I think is also really cool, is that you can upload a video. So I need a bit of explaining around how to use this. So I'll add some video content around here, which is great. And you can do it individually for the cards and also for the whole deck, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
And then let's quickly, because I'm quite excited about this. So one of the viewers, Stephen Anderson, is also helping with this deck. There's a lot more to
Correct.
it, but for example, he helped me with a lot of the. So this is a bunch of how might we statements. So it's really about exploring basic challenges and customer experience. And
Right.
so at the front you have this how might we statement, but then there's a whole bunch of metadata that supports this, right? So there's the little design
Right.
that you can go
And
through.
if you're new to UX design and you pick up this deck, they've just stood on your shoulders. Like every year, all those 10,000 hours or X years or whatever, how many years you've been doing this, right? That and you've liaised on this deck with Stephen as well, right? So
Yeah, and a
you're
couple of other
standing on
folks,
both
right?
of your
Yeah.
shoulders, right?
Yeah. So it was really
There's a
rewarding working
lot,
through it. Yeah.
yeah. So
And I think,
if someone uses this, they're getting a lot of insight, a lot of
and I
massive step
totally,
up.
yeah. And I hope this, as soon as it's ready to launch, hopefully soon, to see what people do with this. And also, I like the idea because it's something that I haven't really, and you kind of nudged it, is that, of course, I'm looking also at having a physical version of this, but now bringing it into Deckible makes it like broadly accessible. But then also the fact that you kind of break through this like nervousness, like the Gutenberg blockage, like you talk about, right? It's right there.
Totally.
And
People also look at your response, your reaction was you got curious about the deck. So you looked at it on Deckable for free for 3 days. You can then buy it or not buy it, right? And it, people also don't want to wait. Like, no, if you don't give them the deck when they want it, they've got to wait for it to arrive, and they've got to pay for postage. The deck, where do you keep the stock?
yeah,
You keep it in Europe, you keep it in the US, you keep it in the UK, inside or outside the EU. It's like there's a lot of stuff going on, and you end up paying Amazon for this and paying for that. But you're not going to make a lot of money from it unless you produce a lot of decks, right?
and I must say to you, the one thing that has been very nerve-wracking for me, this is even smaller, but I think it's a big topic, is that one of the aspects that I need to still sort out is that I haven't really, I mean, I did the best I can, and also favors from friends and people who've supported me, but like the copy checking on the actual cards. And I don't think you're going to see any South African Afrikaans in here, but like I would love for someone to look through it. But now that kind of blocks it from being launched, right? And now,
it technically doesn't.
Yeah.
Because you can launch it and update it. This is not a printed copy.
That's the cool thing with the digital version, right?
Right. Honestly, people hold off, and I guarantee you still hold off and you'll still find a typo. So you're better off putting it out there. That's the value of crowdsourcing. People love to tell you've got a typo, and then you fix it and nobody died. Right.
Other thing also that I think I need to mention, this is not a, so, I mean, of course the content's in the cloud, right? But at some point, like people might have seen this, is that you download the deck onto your phone, right? So you can also remove it.
Right.
But for example, if you don't have a connection.
It's just like Audible. So you download the book, and then you can use Deckible. Once you've downloaded it, you can use the deck when you've got no Wi-Fi, right? It runs on a plane, in a cave, wherever you're having that offsite, you can use Deckible.
Yeah. And I must say, like, I mean, just to talk about Dave's example, which I think was quite clever, is that he launched his version of the card deck during the Kickstarter campaign for this actual deck, right? And because the thing is also that the issue is that, I'm waiting for the physical version, and maybe you have delays, like that happens all the time, and there's an issue or like printing issues, and then the deck was available immediately.
You end up with dinging and denting, and you lose a card.
Yeah.
You dent a card, you're like, oh, I love this. So you don't take it places because you cherish it too much, right? You can't lose a card. You can't ding and dent a card. It remembers every time you've drawn a card. It keeps the notes that when you drew that card, right? So that there's a lot of value that a platform adds on top of a physical deck.
Question about Deckible. of course, the other thing is also, what is the business model? If I may ask you that, Nick, like,
Right.
so for the creator slash, and then also like, I mean, of course, I
Right.
mean, you're not a, what's it? You're in business. It's not a,
Yeah, totally.
yeah,
Right. So basically, the creator sets the price for the deck, right? So we advise people not to undervalue their deck because a lot of creators are not kind of like sure. I mean, your deck packages a lot of knowledge, right? That should be what are other decks in that kind of niche? I mean, 50, 60, $70 or whatever
yeah,
you know, right? So and then we get a fee from the App Store, from Apple taking a percentage. So 15% goes there, and then that leaves 85, and we split that with our creators 50-50. So you make 42.5% of the selling price of the deck, but you don't have to, you're not paying us to be on the platform, you didn't pay to list it, right? But you're making money from it. That's a pretty compelling offer. You compare that to a lot of course platforms where you're paying them, 100, 200 a month just to be on there.
yeah.
So we literally try and compare ourselves to Audible and be as much like Audible as we can. So Audible pays out 40% to an exclusive author, right? So and
Man.
there's a lot of decks, right? And we're really just scratching the surface. We're just getting going with this, right?
Yeah, I mean, how long
And
has Deckible be around now, Nick? Like, I mean,
it's 2 years.
yeah,
Yeah.
of blood, sweat, and tears,
True.
or has it been a
It's
joy?
been an incredibly, it's honestly, it's been a hard journey. People are very attached to their paper, but it's, not necessarily logical what they are, and that's okay. It's actually harder to digitize this than it was to digitize Audible or Kindle. When Kindle
Yeah,
came along, they had the words electronically arranged already. When Audible came along, they had the audio files. That we've kind of created a standard for how to upload a deck, how to handle guidebooks, all the things that go with it, right?
here's another one I reviewed. Brilliant
Yeah, I
deck.
know.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's amazing.
and
Wow.
here's another famous
And
person.
and then you've got so you could just, if you click on that, get this deck, right?
Oh yeah, the thing is also you have credits, right? So you can actually,
Right.
yeah, you can try it.
So you can just click try it, right?
And 100% access.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a couple.
So you just, as soon as you click try it, you download it, you've got
There's
it on your
another one.
phone. There's
For
one.
my,
Yeah.
yeah.
Honestly, you've come across a lot of the decks that I've come across along the way, right?
Yeah.
So,
Sometimes I'm useful because here and there I find ones that you haven't seen yet. But
yeah, definitely. No, you have. Well, there was
this is the
that's a
other
great
one.
deck. Story deck's great.
This is a
Love
classic one. Like I actually can't, because this is one I want to review, and it's a pain in the butt
It's
to
out of
get it
stock.
into Europe. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's really
you
like,
don't need to.
yeah, it's right here.
Right.
Really keen.
Honestly, we are. It's very funny, but we're kind of going against. There's so much attachment to paper. But if you look back in time, how did you feel about vinyl and CDs and cassettes? You felt exactly the same at that point in time, right? And
Yeah.
so this is a classic innovation. There's resistance. There's people who dive in early. There are people who go, oh, I get it now. The number of people who've said to me, I didn't get Deckible 2 years ago. And now they're like, oh, I see it. I understood. I've heard everything you've said. I've understood it. I've not disagreed with it, but I can see now why I should do it. Right? It's just this is the path to innovation. It happens again and again and again. It's just absolutely it's like clockwork.
Nick, and like, sorry, I'm like a super curious about, like, the more I think about it, like what is the currently, if you had to, like, just off the top of your head, like, what is the main user base here? Because the thing is, I come in from this business ideation space, but then I'd like the meditation, the kind of reflection, the oracle stuff. Like, there's quite an amount of them. Like, do you see a lot of people using that? Like, where does the weight sit at the moment?
It's everything, and it's honestly, we have to think about that a lot and think about it hard, because we try and make sure if on the Deckible homepage we list this 7 different categories, So we've got 7 high-level categories. And it's important in our mind that we have all of those, and we do, right? And so we have users and customers in each category, but people look at it and go, oh, you'd never ask that question about a book, right? You go to Audible or Kindle and you buy a book and you don't say, well, just a minute, I don't know if I want to read this because there's some books about topics I'm not interested in. Everyone just goes for the thing they're interested in, right? And we have creative decks, strategy decks, business decks, wellness, meditation. Like you can literally there is a deck for everything, right?
It's a rabbit hole. That's the problem.
Well,
it's
a good
in a good way.
That's a good rabbit. Yeah, there's bad rabbits and good rabbits.
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, you just recently, I mean, like maybe I need to ask you, like, what is one of the biggest challenge? What is the thing that you guys? I mean, maybe I need to ask you this, Nick, because I never asked you. Like, how big is the team working on this?
Like, it's 4 of us. Yeah. So we have 2 people on the development team. I'm kind of sometimes developing stuff, but more on the biz dev. And there's 2 of us on biz dev and strategy and marketing and branding, right? So it's classic innovation dilemma stuff. People look at it and go, oh yeah, great, but look at you're a massive fan of decks, but you've got a strong attachment to physical.
Oh yeah, I have a problem.
But there's nothing wrong with that because that's exactly how everyone felt about music in 1999.
Yeah. But the thing is, at the moment, I would say to you, like, I want both.
People still have both. Yeah. Like, Marshall McLuhan. Have you heard of Marshall McLuhan? The medium is the message guy. Oh, yeah. People always said, what? Will TV kill radio? No, it didn't. Right? Did movies kill books? No. Did TikTok kill anything? No. We just our attention moves around, and
it's whatever makes sense for the moment, right? Yeah.
Everyone will do what they want to do when they want to do it, but there comes a point where the accessibility of carrying these decks with you, when you go somewhere, if you go to an offsite somewhere and you go, damn, I didn't bring my decks. I wish I'll make sure I have them digital in future, right? I mean,
yeah.
I have a lot of card decks. I play a lot of board games. I have physical books, but I have.
Yeah, you can't carry them with you.
800. Like, I have 800 books on my phone. I have 800 audio books. I'm not abnormal. I know people who've got thousands of Kindles, right? And there are lots of people who have decks, but you can't bring them with you all the time. You can't bring all your books just in case, right?
Yeah.
So you don't. How many albums do you have today?
I mean, I have lost track, to be honest. Like
I have nothing. Do you still have albums?
I don't. No. I have 0. Like I have a couple of like CDs left in South Africa that I didn't want to kind of get rid of. But honestly, I have nothing for the last.
That's my case. My case rests, right? It's a matter of time.
Yeah.
Time will change behavior.
And I guess that this brings me, like, I want to start thinking about wrapping it up, if you don't mind, because I also know that you also have a life beyond sitting with me on LinkedIn. We could talk for hours, which is a problem. Sure. If you think about the next 5 years, if you had your wish, what would be your view for Deckible going forward? Like, also considering things like AI and all this other nonsense happening. Like,
right. Yeah, AI would influence things. AI would be, deck on demand. Like, you could imagine a deck being created just for you on demand for everything you need just in time. And I can totally see that we would, in 5 years, we could have a point where if you see a deck, a physical deck, it would be on Deckible, right? Getting publishers are late adopters. They're conservative folk. They didn't invent Audible or Kindle. They didn't innovate in the book industry, so they're not going to innovate in card decks. And we've done that. So those creators will come to us in good time, right?
Yeah.
That's the space is what we have recognized is what's changed is the way we learn. We want to learn just in time, not just in case. University was just in case. We want to move to a just in time model. We learn stuff on TikTok just in time, right? And there's so much changing about how we consume content. So, Deckible offers you visuals, text, audio, video. You're doing something. It's engaging. So it's more memorable. I don't know if you've heard this statistic, but we remember 10% of what we read.
Yeah.
We remember 90% of what we experience.
Totally.
So that's why a card deck is more of a physical card deck is more of an experience than reading a book. But a digital card deck is even more because it's on your phone, it's with you, you can listen, you can watch, you can journal, you can take notes.
Yeah,
it just makes sense.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because I think one of the things that I said to folks, because sometimes I think I opened the stream saying, like, people started calling me the card deck guy in my community. I think you're more a card deck guy than I am, and I know a couple of, like, Mr. Stephen P. Anderson is even worse.
Yeah, well, Stephen is, yeah.
Yeah, like, that's insanity, right? He causes me a lot of financial problems. But the thing is, he's got a brilliant newsletter called Mighty Minds and I'm hoping to get him on the stream soon as well. But the thing is, you touched on something talking about experiences, and I feel like what I said in the opening of the stream is that the card decks I started thinking and talking about this creativity thing, but one of the things that drew me into this is I think we both explored this experience. I was a little bit earlier than you, was the College of Extraordinary Experiences, where with Joe Pine and all these kind of things, thinking about meaningful and memorable experiences. And I started thinking about, like, we are bringing people together. And I think there's a lot of facilitators and people thinking about this, that we are bringing people together to get fresh, new concepts and ideas out of them, or potentially also to create new experiences, right? But why can't the collaboration, the getting together, be an experience in itself? And that's kind of what switched me on into this kind of area of gameplay, cards, like, because they become a natural habit or a natural tool to bring the kind of interesting into the session or in the experience, and kind of just locks into what you've been talking about throughout the stream. So definitely very.
And also, I don't know if you know about the WXO. That's another place.
Yeah, totally.
I applied and got accepted, but I didn't get around to joining yet. But yeah, it's on the list.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the areas. Nick, is there anything that I missed? Like, I mean, we've spoken about kind of the value of cards. We explored Deckible, Deckible.com. I tried to flash it up on the screen. It's definitely where people can go and check out, download the app, explore the content. People can get hold of you on LinkedIn, through Deckible.
Absolutely.
And you are very approachable, by the way.
Yeah, I'm very accessible. What you need to be, right?
Yeah.
Honestly, I think the thing is, don't sit on the fence and scratch your head and want to know everything. Just dive in.
Yeah. And I think this is maybe something that people can learn from you, Nick. Sorry, I continuously cut you off, but I get excited, is that I think in one way what you've shown me, and I also pick up through the conversation we've had here, is that, and we didn't do it justice, but we explored a lot of things that you've done throughout your career, right? And I think elements of just go and do it, but in the right way, not bullshit, but go and do it, take action. And then also one of our first conversations where you said to me, just go do it. Like, don't be a dummy, do it.
But look, isn't this hilarious? Like, honestly, I have conversations talking about Stephen. I've had conversations with Stephen. It's fascinating. He's just the same as you. You're like mirror image of things he's like, oh, and not until it's perfect. And he has this strong feeling it has to be printed. And he's like, I haven't got the money to print it, or, how do I print it, fund this? Like, it took a lot of cajoling, I guess, and nudging to, and then you're like, oh, now I think you've shifted a lot, having gone through the experience of loading this deck. I mean, you've created it in the meantime from when we first spoke, right? But
Yeah.
you were very protective of not wanting to let it out until you felt it was finished. And then you gave me the artwork, and then within 3 days, you'd updated the artwork completely because you sat down with Stephen, right?
Yeah,
That's the essence. This is creativity in action, right?
Yeah.
If you sit down and design it, it never goes anywhere. If you get on and do it, it lives and breathes and evolves, right? And I think I've also discovered there's a set of people who get into Deckible and they're not click curious. There's two types of people in this world. There's people who click everywhere and figure out stuff, and other people go, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And the modern user just clicks everywhere. And I didn't know the other type existed because I don't watch a video on how to do anything. I just click and go, that's how you do it. Right?
Yeah.
You know, and that's the essence of what we're trying to empower. We're trying to empower creatives to say, you can do this. This is a medium for you. You can make money selling your content, selling your art, selling your journaling, your meditation, your mindfulness, your tarot deck, your coaching deck, your business model, there are ways to sell art and there are ways to sell digital content, but we're selling experiences. Right? And that is different. But those words won't make any sense to you unless you dive in and play. Right? Dive in, play, buy some decks, support Deckible, support an artist.
Yeah, get it in people's
the artist
hands,
gets
right?
paid, right?
Yeah.
Right. And I can this is classic evangelism. This is evangelism at its finest. But
yeah. But also, like, I have to be honest, like, I watch you and I see the love that you have for the platform and where you wanted to go, right? And
right.
I'm really excited to be on the journey a little bit and have the experience. Thus far, it's been really joy.
As Steve Jobs said, if you aren't passionate about what you're doing, don't do it because it's bloody hard work. You're going to get punched in the face 1,000 times. You're also it's a roller coaster. You're going to go and then climb again and then fall. And that's the experience. Like, you have to love it. What makes me love it is I see the potential for it. And I see the number of calls where I actually see the person on the other end of the call, like literally vibrating with excitement about they didn't know this was possible, right? That's what gets me up in the morning. That's what inspires me, because I know I'm enabling and empowering people to find a way to do that. We're still early. We need lots of support and love and attention, right? But we are, lots of people say no, but there's more than enough people who say yes, and we're moving along that path.
Yeah.
Right? And look, like how long have we since we first spoke? Like 18 months ago, 2 years ago?
Yeah, it was like the first time around is like, but then also life happened, right? And then,
right.
But I also think, to be honest with you, like, I mean, when I spoke to you the first time, it was really like, because I have to credit you, like, it did drive me to, because you did say to me, just go out and do it, because we were talking just about the general content. But the thing is, in the meantime, it wasn't really the kind of, there was, so the first thing that I wanted to do is when I landed on the concept of the cards that I created, like I started seeing patterns and I started seeing the value of where people could use it, right? Then, of course, I went, okay, cool, what does this look like? So I have to give credit to Mr. Anderson there that helped me kind of identify certain patterns, and we kind of worked it out. But then you go into the design phase. And I think that was where I circled back to you, and you kind of kicked my ass a little bit again to say, okay, cool, like, because I think I could have sat on it for even longer. Like,
you could have, honestly, the number of people I speak to, this is totally, absolutely 100% normal. Like, this is, everyone does and behaves this way, right? That's innovation. That's trying things. That's, I'm asking you to change behavior of a lifetime of perfectionism and complete something before you go to the next step. Right.
It's that at some point it needs to ship, right, Nick? That's the other thing. Like, it doesn't help if it sits on a laptop somewhere. It needs to ship, and then you just have to close your eyes.
So many people don't finish their projects. It's so sad, right?
Yeah. Anyways, Nick, It was really
Thank you.
a joy to have you on. Like, we'll definitely maybe explore more, because I think there's a lot of topics. And thanks for just jumping into this ad hoc conversation. I just want to repeat again, and we'll share this in the captions, and we'll definitely see Nick pop up, and especially Deckible pop up in future content that I cover, because I see the overlap.
Honestly, if someone's curious, don't be afraid. I don't bite. I'm very open and very, easygoing and friendly. And if you've got an idea, I'm more than happy to. I talk to people about their ideas and help them shape them. Right. Like,
And I can
the number of
definitely
decks
attest to that. Yeah.
Right. And that's part of the joy of it, right? It's like, I love helping people like that. And then to see your deck come to reality, that's such a rewarding experience for me, right?
Yeah.
It validates everything we're doing. I look at it and go, well, that's an amazing, unique piece of intellectual property that didn't exist before we had a conversation. Now it does. Like, that makes me feel, that's great, right? That's what this stuff's all about.
Let's do more.
And yeah. Cool,
Nick.
Well, thank you.
Let me wrap this up. I'm going to quickly close this down. Thank you very much. And then thank you for watching the stream. Remember, you can watch the replay on YouTube, also on LinkedIn. It's also available in my podcast, so you can listen to the audio version of this. I just want to quickly just go through again that you can go to deckible.com, download the app in your favorite app store, go explore the content there. There's also tokens available, so you can explore decks. Then, of course, I mentioned, and also a bit of selfless self-promotion here, is that my card deck will be available very soon. Very soon. Nick is probably going to kick my ass to do it even sooner, and you will find it on Deckible. If you want to know when it's going to go live, and also when I go live with other interesting folks that I'm going to be talking to, I've got someone else that's going to be on soon. Jump to www.creativecoffeebreak.live. There's a mailing list. I'm terrible. I don't spam people because I'm too lazy to write too many emails. So if you want to know when we're going live and when my card deck or CX toolkit's going to launch, please jump into that mailing list and I will let you know when that happens, and maybe also give a couple of free decks away on Deckible for sure for people to go access, because I'm super stoked to get it out there. Once again, thanks to Nick. Go to deckible.com. You can find Nick Kellet on LinkedIn. Super approachable, super helpful, and let's see where this platform goes. Then again, thank you for watching, and catch you in the comments. Good night.